said, I'll let you go for 100 grand. So I was like, okay, fine. So end of the season, they came in for me, offered 100 grand. Barry turned it down. Literally couldn't make it up. So I rang him, Barry, can I come and see you, please? Yeah, of course you can, Lockie, come on. Yeah, I'll see you in the office. Like proper just wheeler dealer type. He was even running around that season. As a midfielder, he broke into a sweat. That
what are you trying to say?
Well, a lazy git. That's what I'm trying to say. He's one of the most talented players I've ever played with. But boy, if he had, effort in his game, he could have played like at the top level.
Yes, folks, welcome back. It's another podcast and another Deefiant hero as a guest. Matt Lockwood, how are you, mate?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh yeah, marvellous. I think with all these Deefiant guests that I'm getting on, it's turning into a bit of a series now. We had Barry Smith last time. We've now got you, Matt. We were speaking off camera there, and we're sort of thinking about a suggestion of who we're going to get next. And I think we're maybe talking about Nicky Riley, but we'll see. We'll speak to him and see what he says.
That's the thing, though. But with the Deefiant team, there's actually not many of us, so you could probably do us all within a month, and then that's it. Bearing in mind we only had 11 players, didn't we, at one stage? So it wouldn't take you long to get through that team.
Yeah, no, definitely something to think about, and I think we'll reach out at the end of this anyway. So, but however, this one's about you. Unbelievable career, Leyton Orient icon. Moved to a big club like Nottingham Forest. We'll also cover potential moves that you nearly ended up in the English Premier League as well. But where did it all begin for you in football? What was your early footballing memories, and how did you initially get into the sport in the first place?
I probably think like most kids, as a youngster, as soon as I could walk, I had a ball at my feet or under my arm, or I used to sleep with a football. It was just, I suppose, all kids' dreams, wasn't it, to be a footballer? So I started, as we all did as a youngster. I think I went to my first team when I was 6, maybe. Dad took me down there and just went from there. And I ended up, the team that I joined as a 6-year-old, then my dad was the manager. So we ended up staying at that club for probably maybe 6 years. And then because I started at 6, and then by the time I was 10, I signed for West Ham. So because the first team that I played for, we were probably like the best team in the area. So then we used to get to all the cup finals, and then when you were at the cup finals, because I grew up in Southend in Essex, the cup finals were always at Southend United's ground at Roots Hall. So then you would play in the final, scouts would be there as they were back in the day. And then after the game, they'd go up to my dad, who was a manager, and be like, oh, who's the number 7? Who's the number 10? I was always the one that they asked after. So I ended up going to West Ham as a 10-year-old, which was brilliant. You think, oh, I've made it, it's amazing. And then carried on playing for that club. And then I ended up leaving and joining their bitter rivals, because I remember my dad was the manager, but then he was started towards the end of his reign in charge. He ended up getting a bit of stick from some of the other parents, because I don't think they quite liked the fact that I was the best player, and then maybe I was taking penalties and all this, and so he just thought like, sod this, I'm not going to do this anymore. So he quit. I left. And then I went and joined the second best team, and then obviously made them the best. Not saying that it was all down to me, but it was. So then I was there for a couple of years. And then when I think we got to about the age of maybe 14, 15, and then we weren't allowed to play for our Sunday teams on a regular basis because we were all at pro teams. So I was at West Ham. I think, to be fair, there was 2 of us at West Ham. There was one lad at Norwich, one at Arsenal. We all were sort of at pro clubs. So that team then folded, and then I ended up joining. There was a few of us actually went and joined then the 3rd best team in the league. And that ended up being the current Millwall manager's team. So Neil Harris played for that team. So we all went and joined his team, and then we made them the best. So we used to win the league every year. But so that was my start in football, just playing locally in Southend in Essex. Just obviously just living, just doing what you love and just kicking the ball around with your friends. And I was sort of quite good at it, and I got picked up as a 10-year-old for West Ham.
Brilliant. And then you ended up at Southend. Was that a sort of pro youth kind of deal, or how did that come about? What was it?
Yeah, so it was. They called it YTS, so like youth
YTS,
yeah. So back in the day on £35 a week. But yeah, so I went there from West Ham. So I was at West Ham from 10 to 6. I was 10 years old when I started. I was there for 6 years, and then when they were offering out their YTS forms, I got released. They turned around and said to me, but to be fair, they didn't even tell me. They told my dad. So I was out of training, and my dad got called in while we were training, and said, "Oh, look, we're releasing Matt. We don't think he's big enough or strong enough." And then Dad had to tell me in the car on the way home, and I was like, "Wow, what a job that is for a parent telling their son he's not good enough to be at West Ham." You could. I suppose I can't remember, but I'm guessing I probably burst into tears as I thought my dream had ended. But because we lived in Southend and that was our local team, my dad actually knew where the manager of Southend lived. So him and I went round the corner the next night and knocked on his door. And he must have thought, who's this weirdo? But we just explained, we just said, look, I've just been released from West Ham. Is there any chance I can come in for a trial? And at the time, Southend were actually quite good, though, in the Championship. So it wasn't like, you were going from a Premier League club to a, League Two, non-league, whatever. Southend were a decent side in the Championship. So he said, "Yep, that's fine. Come in." So I went in for a training, and they signed me immediately. And I did my 2-year apprenticeship at Southend.
Yeah, and then was Southend a team that you supported growing up? I know you were obviously from there. Was it them or was it West Ham? Who was it you supported?
So I supported Liverpool. So it was the era of Ian Rush, Graham Souness, Alan Hansen, all those guys. So I'm guessing I supported them for the same reason that every kid now supports Man City, because they were the best team and they were winning things. So I must have been a glory hunter. Bearing in mind, I live like 250 miles from Liverpool. It's not as though they were my local team. But, having grown up at West Ham, I used to go and watch them a little bit. But Southend was my local team. And back then, Southend used to play on a Friday night. So my dad and I used to go down to every home game without fail. We'd be in the stand watching. I was a mascot for Southend, I think on my 6th birthday maybe. And I actually had a photo of me walking out of the tunnel with the captain. And then he ended up being the assistant manager at Leyton Orient when I signed for them. So when I first went into Leyton Orient and they offered me a deal, I took the photo in and said, look, there's me and you, 20 years ago or whatever it was. No, it wouldn't have been 20 years ago. It would have been. So I signed for Orient when I was 21-ish, I suppose. So yeah, so it would have been maybe sort of like 14 years. He couldn't believe it. It was quite an interesting one. But yeah, so I ended up signing for Southend, doing my 2-year apprenticeship there, and then I ended up getting released at the end of my apprenticeship. And again, not because I wasn't good enough, not because I hadn't developed and progressed well enough, purely and simply because the first team manager lost his job towards the end of the season of my final year. And the chairman brought in a guy just to save the club from getting relegated. So Southend were in the Championship. They were fighting relegation. So Peter Taylor was the manager. He ended up getting sacked. And they brought in a guy called John Thompson, I think. I'm not sure, John might not be the right name, but it was definitely Thompson was the surname. And he didn't come and look at watch the youth team at all. He was there literally just to keep the first team up. So at the end of the season, and bearing in mind he was only there for a couple of months, at the end of the season, the chairman said to him, right, who are we offering pro contracts to out of the youth team? And he was like, no idea, don't know any of them. He said, I literally don't even know their names. So the chairman then called our youth team manager in and said, right, who are we offering pro to? He gave him 3 names. I was one of them. And the chairman turned around and said, right, there hasn't been any lads from the youth team get in the first team over recent years. I want to watch them play in a reserve game. And then if I think they're good enough, I'll give them pro. So the youth team manager at the time was Danny Greaves, Jimmy Greaves' son. I got on really well with Danny. We used to go and play golf together, sort of socially and stuff. And he pulled me and he said, look, this is what's happened. This is what the chairman said. And I was carrying a slight knock. I remember I had a sore heel. And I turned around and said to him, I said, look, I'm not going to play in this game because I'm not 100% fit. And I'm not also going to risk 2 years of like my progression to be judged by a guy that doesn't know anything about football. Yes, he owns a football club, but I don't even know what his background was, how he made his money, but he literally didn't have a clue about football. So I'm not going to be judged by someone that's never seen me play before, because if I go and have a bad game, he's just going to turn around and say, look, he's not good enough. So I didn't play. I said I was injured. The other 2 lads did play. I watched the game. They were shocking. And we all got released after the game. The chairman turned around and said, no, they're nowhere near good enough. Just get rid of all of them. So Danny Greaves was fuming, because at the end of the day, he's a youth team manager. So he's trained us over the last 2 years, put in loads and loads of work, and improved us to an extent where we should have got pro. And yeah, it's just sort of been thrown back in his face. So our very next youth team game was away to QPR. And before the game, we didn't know what had happened, but Danny had gone and spoken to the youth team manager at QPR, which was Billy Bonds, the West Ham legend himself. And he said, look, these 3 boys should have been given pro. The chairman's an idiot. Can you have a look at them and see what you think? So Ray Wilkins was the first team manager at QPR at the time. He was there watching as well, because the QPR first team were at home that Saturday. So he was watching the youth team in the morning, then he was going to go to Loftus Road and obviously take the first team in the afternoon. And then also the QPR chief scout was there as well. So they all knew what was happening. They all were there watching. And back then, I used to play centre midfield. So I was sort of like a box to box attacking midfielder type, getting forward, trying to score goals. Very different than what the Dundee fans would have seen of me when I came up in my old age later on in my career. But yeah, so back then, bombing up and down. And I used to take obviously all the set pieces. And I remember towards the end of the game, we had a corner, and it was an in-swinging corner. And what we used to do is we used to have our 2 centre forwards and our 2 centre halves stand on the goal line. So 2 in front of the goalkeeper, 2 behind the goalkeeper. And then I would have to try and bend it under the crossbar to sort of like, I'm trying to score. And it was just like an absolute melee in there, like free for all. Anyway, so I did the signal, whipped it right under the crossbar. QPR cleared it for another corner, and it was back where I was. But when I took the first corner, Ray Wilkins was literally stood 5 yards away from me watching, because he was on his way to the car park to leave. And then, so I got the ball again. He went, can you do me a favour, son? I sort of looked at him thinking, what? He went, could you do the same corner again? So I was like, okay. So I did the signal, both had 2 hands up. Everyone piled on the goal line again. And I whipped it in perfectly again, right under the crossbar, exactly where the first one went, exactly where it was meant to go. And that was it. He walked off. Then I got the phone call, or the conversation after the game was like, yeah, look, Ray was very impressed. He wants you to come in and train with the first team. So I within a week, I go from being released from my boyhood club, Southend, who I always wanted to play for. As a kid growing up, being a mascot, I was desperate to play for Southend, my local team. So I go from getting released from them and then signing for a Premier League club in the space of a week. And I remember my dad actually saw the chief executive at Southend the week after, and he pulled him and he said, how can you as a club do that? So you've got a lad who's a local boy, used to come and watch all the home games, supported the team his whole life. He's good enough to get pro, and yet you've allowed him to leave, and he's now gone and signed for a Premier League team. He said, like, how does that work? And the guy was like, oh, I don't know. He didn't really have an answer for him. And then signed my first pro contract at QPR. Ray, because I went for a week's trial, and Ray was like, "Yeah, look, I think you've got something here. I can see something in you. We'd love to take you on and give you a chance." So so I signed my first pro contract at QPR in the Premier League. So I was delighted, as you can imagine.
Yeah, and did you play any first team games for QPR?
No, I didn't. I was only in the reserves. Annoyingly, there was an opportunity that I sort of felt at the time that I potentially could have played in the first team. So I was playing central midfield, as I said, and the star player in the youth setup for QPR was Nigel Quasi. Do you remember him?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So he's played for Scotland. He played in the Premier League for West Ham and West Brom and everything. Good player, really good player. So he was a couple of years younger than me at QPR. and very highly rated. You know, the chief scout loved him. You know, he was going to be the next big thing. But at the time, I was playing better than him, and I was keeping him out of the reserves. So I was playing week in, week out in the reserves, and our reserve team was really good. We actually won the league the year that I was there. And bearing in mind, this was when it used to be called the combination league. So it was all the top teams. So it was QPR, Arsenal, Tottenham, West Ham, you know, Palace. Like literally every single London team was in this league, and we were top of the league. And I was keeping him out of the reserves, and I was playing really, really well. And the first team were playing Man United away on the Saturday. And there was a couple of injuries, a couple of suspensions, and they only had one fit central midfielder. And all the first team boys, you know, were saying to me, "Oh, Matt, I think you've got a chance here. I think you're going to play because you're playing so well in the reserves." You know, and I'm like, "Oh my God." Like, you know, I was like 18. And I'm thinking, I'm going to go and play at Old Trafford. This is unbelievable. And then what they ended up doing is they ended up taking Nigel from the youth team and played him in the first team and bypassed me. And I remember watching Match of the Day that night, and it was all focused on, you know, this young 16, 17-year-old Nigel Quasi, you know, making his like Premier League debut. And I'm like, wow, it's so unfair because obviously I was playing better than him at the time. And if it had gone, you know, as it should have done, and obviously me in my naive 18-year-old brain doesn't really know how football works at this stage, thinking, well, it should be me, but it wasn't. So no, so that was the closest I got to playing in the QPR first team. But like I say, I was only there a year, and I didn't. And at the end of the year, when I did get released, because QPR got relegated that season, so Les Ferdinand and Trevor Sinclair. I mean, Trevor actually stayed a little while, but Les left that summer. You know, we had like some really good players. But yeah, so I got released, and it was really nice actually, because all the first team players all pulled me individually and said, "I can't believe they're releasing you. You're such a good player. You know, I think they've made a mistake here." But you know, Ray obviously had to cut the costs, had to cut the squad down, and he didn't feel that I was, you know, going to be competing for a first team place that following season. So I got released. But I was lucky enough to have well, obviously Ian Holloway with QPR that year. He was in the first team. He was central midfielder, and he'd seen enough in me in training and in practice matches to sort of want to take me with him, because he left QPR that summer and got the player manager's job at Bristol Rovers, and I ended up being there was 3 of us from QPR that he took with him down to Bristol, or across to Bristol, and I was one of those. So I was, you know, Ian Holloway's sort of first signing as a manager many moons ago.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. We were speaking at length off camera, and football is just a game of opinions. And one manager's opinion of you varied to another manager's opinion. So, like, they obviously fancied Nigel to go in ahead of you, where others probably thought that wasn't the right decision. So it's just
exactly, and that's the thing, and I can't complain, because Nigel went on and had a great career, and he's a better footballer than me, so I can't complain. But at that moment in time, I was doing better than he was, you know, and it wasn't fair, but I know football's not fair now. Obviously, I'm 47-year-old, I'm grey, and I know how football works now. But back then, I was properly gutted. You know, really disappointed, because I thought, well, I can't do anymore. You know, I'm playing week in, week out in the reserves. I'm doing well. I'm scoring goals. I'm training with the first team. It was all going very, very well, and that was my one and only chance to play in the Premier League. As it turns out, you know, obviously I didn't think that as an 18-year-old. I thought I might have got more chances, but clearly I didn't.
Yeah. And then obviously you alluded to, you went to Bristol Rovers with Ian Holloway. What was he like as a manager? Obviously fresh into management at that point. Was it a good ground into professional football life under Ian?
It was. I loved him. I thought he was great. I mean, I loved him as a teammate at QPR. Obviously, I know he was in the first team and I was in the reserves, but he was like real. I mean, you know, how he is on TV, he's just how he is 24/7. He is literally just like a little Duracell bunny. He's just. You know, I'm not going to say he's nuts, because he's not, but he's just such good fun and such good energy, and he, you know. And it's interesting, actually, because when I came to Dundee, Rab Douglas had played under him at Leicester, and Rab couldn't stand him. Rab thought he was an idiot. I loved Ollie. I thought he was great. And obviously as a 18, 19-year-old lad, bearing in mind he was only probably 35, 36 at the time, because he was a player manager at Bristol Rovers. So he didn't quit when he left QPR. He was player manager at Rovers. And then he ended up stopping because I think he realised he couldn't do both. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed my time. And to be fair, whenever anyone sort of asked the question, who was the biggest influence in your career, Ian Holloway is 100% the biggest influence in my career, because he was the one that saw something in me at QPR that changed me from a centre midfielder to a left back. We had a practice match at QPR, and it was first team versus reserves, and the reserve left back was actually injured on the day, and they just turned around and said to me, "Oh, Matt, you're left-footed. You go and play left back." So I was like, "Oh, typical. Just get chucked out of my position." Nigel probably went and played in centre midfield, so I just got binned. And the day we played them, Trevor Sinclair was on the right wing, so I'm up against Trevor Sinclair, and this was when he was flying. He was getting the England team. He was literally on fire. But the day that we had the practice match, he had the flu. And he probably shouldn't even have come in to train, but it was a Thursday and he wanted to be involved on the Saturday, so he came in. And in the practice match, I literally had him in my pocket. Couldn't get past me. Every time he tried to take me on, I tackled him. I played really, really well. And it was only like for half hour or whatever. After the game, Ollie ran past me on his way into the dressing room. He sort of stopped. He was like, "Oh, have you ever played left back before?" And I was like, "No, that's my first time." I said, like, beginner's luck or something like that. And that was it. That's all he asked. And he ran off. And then when he signed me, he was like, "I think you're a left back." He said, "What I saw that day in training," he said, "I honestly think you're a left back." And I'm like, no. I want to play centre midfield. I'm this, I'm that. I can get forward. Because I was a really good athlete back in the day. Long distance running. No one in pre-season has ever beaten me. And Ollie was a proper athlete as well. He loved like the pre-season stuff. So him and I, when we did pre-season together at Bristol Rovers, we used to just like be bombing off miles in front of everyone, because that was back in the day before these sports scientists came in, where you would literally go and do like a 6-mile road run for pre-season. And him and I would probably be like a mile ahead of everyone, because we that was just how we were built. We could just run and run and run. Obviously, I wasn't the quickest, and neither was he. But for long distance stuff, we were like machines. And he loved me, like properly loved me. But he just sort of said, "Look," he said, "No, I just think you're a left back." So the first game, so I think I remember in pre-season I was playing midfield. To get game time in, because one of the other lads that he signed with me from Bristol Rovers was actually a left back, and I think it was the final pre-season game before the season started. My mate from QPR, obviously the left back, had a stinker. We played away at Port Vale. I think he maybe scored an own goal, was at fault for another couple. He had obviously he was awful. And then first game of the season, Ollie put me at left back, and I never played anywhere else. And I kept on going to him, going, "Oh, can I go and play midfield? Can I play midfield?" And he said, "No." He said, "Honestly, I think you're a left back." And 22 years later of my career, and I played left back every game, I think he's definitely got that right. And also, I don't think I would have had the longevity of a career if I'd have played in midfield, because playing centre midfield, you're competing with left footers, right footers, all sorts. So there's loads more players, loads more competition. But a left back, it's not like it's a dying breed, but there's not a whole lot of competition at that in that spot. And every club that I've ever been at, there was only maybe 2 of you. Where midfielders, you've probably got 5 or 6 midfielders which you're competing with. So whenever I see Ollie, I always remind him and always thank him for seeing that in me and giving me a chance to play there.
Brilliant. Do you still speak to him to this day?
I don't keep in touch with him sort of like on the phone or text, but if I'm at a game and he's there, I'll always make sure I go out of my way to say hello. Because the last time I saw him, I was commentating on a game. This was a while ago now, so I think he might have been managing QPR. So that sort of shows how long ago it was. And so where I commentate for the BBC, I might maybe do, if it's a midweek game and there's a game on a Tuesday night and a Wednesday night, they might send me down to like Liverpool on the Tuesday night, and then if Everton are playing at home the Wednesday night, I'll stay in a hotel and then do the game the next day. And I think whatever game I did on the Tuesday, the hotel that I stayed in was the same hotel that QPR was staying in. So when I went down for breakfast in the morning, I didn't realise, but you just see a sea of blue tracksuits over in the corner. And Ian Holloway was there, so I went over and obviously had breakfast with him and stuff like that. But yeah, you know, he is a very big influence on my career. We ended up doing our coaching badges together. We did our B license together. And that was interesting, being in a classroom with him when he's bouncing off the walls and just like going hyper as he does. But he's a thoroughly entertaining guy. And yeah, I've got nothing but good things to say about him.
Yeah, I tell you, I would have loved to have seen him managing Scotland. It's probably that ship's kind of sailed now, but I would have loved to have seen it. Obviously we just had Neil Warnock.
That's the thing, that you know, they're man motivators, and you know, you sort of feel with their personality where it's so infectious. He walks into a room and everyone lifts. And I mean, sometimes, you know, you get managers that are the complete opposite, that are very sort of dour, and they bring that atmosphere down. They walk into a room and everyone's like, oh, he's in a mood. And you sort of treading on eggshells a little bit. But Ollie would be like coming in, going, oh, all right, boys, what did you do the weekend? Did you go out? Or did you meet any girls? And like, he was just like that. And actually, the three of us that he signed for QPR, we actually went and lived with him. So because it was the first time we'd left home, he said to sort of our parents, he said, look, I'm buying a house and it's got like a granny annex on the side. He said, once we move in, the boys can come and live there. So we weren't in the same house as him, but we were like next door neighbours. So he just said, look, he said, obviously don't go out on a Thursday or Friday night, the day before a game. He said, but on a Saturday night, if you want to go out, enjoy yourself. Don't think that I'm going to be at the window looking at you. You know, thinking, oh, where are you going? He said, I'm probably going to be looking, thinking, I'm jealous, I want to come with you. But, you know, he was brilliant. And, you know, he used to come around the house and we'd play darts together. He was a good landlord, to be fair. And we lived with him for 18 months. And it was, it was very interesting.
Yeah, I think that sort of old school going out on a Saturday night after a win is kind of lost on the modern day footballer. It's a bit of a shame, really, but sports science kind of put an end to that, I think. So obviously your form with...
Of course, sports science, but also social media as well. Because now everyone's going out with phones, and if you're somewhere where maybe you shouldn't be, now it's films, it's photos, but back in our day, you could go wherever you want. I didn't even have a mobile phone. When I say to my kids, I didn't have a mobile phone until I was 19, they're like, what? How did you not have a phone? Bearing in mind, they're both addicted to theirs, like walking around like this. But, you know, it was easier times back then, you know, carry a pigeon to go and let people know where you were or if you needed to save them. But no, it was a great time. I had a really good time down in Bristol. It was good.
That's it. We do smoke signals here in Oban. We just do the chimneys and that, you know. That's it. So yeah, your form with Bristol Rovers ended up in a move to Leyton Orient, where you spent 9 years at a club where you made over 300 appearances. What was your key to the longevity of the club? Why did it fit so well for you at that period of time?
Because they wouldn't sell me, basically. So, and that's it. You know, it was one of those. So when I left Bristol Rovers, you know, bearing in mind Bristol Rovers offered me a new contract, so they wanted me to stay. I asked for a certain amount of money. They wouldn't give it to me. So in the end, like Ollie just said, look, you know, the chairman won't budge. So I left. So I had a couple of options, and I chose Orient. I don't really know why I chose Orient. It wasn't because it was in London, because I didn't really mind about going back home. But, you know, went to Orient. I just got a feel about the club. You know, it's a small family club, but they sort of had ambition because of the chairman. You know, Barry Hearn was the chairman, and you know, for those of you that don't know Barry, he's a brilliant guy. You know, he's obviously he's paid me to say that, but you know, but he is a promoter. You know, he's done the boxing, he's done the darts, he's done the snooker. Whatever he touches, it turns to gold. And I think, you know, even now when you see his son's taken over the boxing world, you know, the Hearns know how to run a business and they know how to make something successful. And I wanted, you know, having done my homework, I wanted to be a part of that, because Orient had ambitions to move up the leagues and to grow and to get bigger. So I went down there, signed I think I signed just a year to start off with. And once I started playing, they were like, oh wow, Matt's good. So Barry quickly offered me a new contract, offered me a long-term contract, which I signed because I didn't have an agent. I didn't have anyone to advise me. I had my parents who were pretty risk adverse, and they turned around and said, look, you've been offered a 4-year deal here. What if you get injured next week and you can't play again? You've got 4 years behind you. And I'm like, yeah, sounds good. And the wages were all agreed and everything. I was happy. So I signed the deal. In hindsight, shouldn't have signed a long-term contract like that, because now Barry's got me where he wants me. So if any offers come in, I can't leave because I've got 3-4 years left on my deal. And so now my value went sort of through the roof. So we had a lot of Premier League clubs making offers. I know this for a fact now because now I'm older and I sort of, in my networking world, I've met the chief execs of these Premier League clubs that were making offers for me, and they've confirmed that it was true. But they made offers, and Barry always wanted way more than they were offering. And the problem he had was I was his star player, and he didn't want to lose me. I think I was his wife's favourite player. And, it was one of those where if he was going to sell me, it was going to be for £1 million plus. I was a League Two left back. I wasn't worth £1 million. But that was his magic number. That's what, floated his boat, and that's what he would have sold me for. But the Premier League clubs were offering half of that, and he just kept on refusing. And it was one of those where the clubs were looking and saying, right, for £1 million, we're not sure if Matt's quick enough to play in the Premier League, but for £500,000, we'll take a punt on him. And it just didn't happen. I mean, I was reading that Liverpool, Leeds, Newcastle, Tottenham, West Ham, Charlton were all sort of coming in for me. And obviously, I don't know whether all of them were true, but I definitely know a few were. And as a 21, 22-year-old lad, you're like, wow, this is amazing. And I was playing well. I was quite a big fish in League Two at the time. I sort of had quite a high profile, bearing in mind I was literally a lower league player. But they just could never agree a fee on me. And because I had so long left on my contract, I was like, I'm sort of stuck. So that sort of rolled on. And then after the sort of like the Premier League clubs lost interest to a certain extent, then the Championship clubs started sniffing round. And there was, I know Reading came in, Crystal Palace when they were in the Championship came in, Millwall wanted to sign me. And I ended up, actually, I went on trial with Millwall for pre-season because Mark McGee was the manager at the time. And said to me, he said to the club, look, I'm interested in Matt, but I've never seen him play. And our manager at the time was like, well, just take him on trial. And I'm like, really? I was like, is that how it works? Like, should I really be going on trial when I've had all these Premier League clubs wanting to sign me for like £500,000? Now I'm going on trial at a Championship club. But I sort of got advice from previous managers who I respected in the game, and they were like, well, what have you got to lose? Why wouldn't you go? And I was like, I suppose not. So went away with Millwall for pre-season. We went to Germany and came back. The manager was like, yeah, look, listen, you've lived up to your reputation. I'd love to sign you. Our chairman will speak to your chairman. Let's see what we can do. So it was Theo Pafitis, the Dragon's Den legend, was the chairman. He spoke to Barry. They couldn't agree a fee. And the deal sort of fell through, and it never happened. And it was, I think it was only about maybe a month after that when I had my big injury, which nearly killed me, let alone finish my career. But when I ruptured my spleen, and so because it was such a huge injury and it was quite a shocking injury, people didn't know if I'd ever come back from it. People didn't know how I would respond, because I suppose if you rupture your Achilles or if you do your cruciate, people have done it in the past, and there's a a process you go through. You have the operation, you do your rehab, and then you'll get back fit. But when you rupture a spleen, people's like, wow, this is different. We've not seen this before. And it took me a while to get over it, to be honest. But in that time, the clubs were like, not sure. But sod's law, that happened the season my contract was coming up to an end. So I was going to let the contract run down, and I was going to leave on a free that summer. And then 6 months before my contract ran out, I ruptured my spleen. And I'm like, what are the chances of that happening? I signed a 4-year deal. I've had all these clubs wanting to sign me. And I'm like, now the power is in my hands. And I go and rupture my bloody spleen.
Sweat away from you. Yeah.
This is it, and there was nothing I could do. And I've got a massive scar from there to from my chest down to my belly button that reminds me every day of what how close I was to sort of having a career that I felt I was good enough to have. And I sort of feel that I never really fulfilled my potential. I never really felt that I played at the level that I should have done. I know I wasn't the quickest and I wasn't the best defender, but I was good at what I did, and I just kept it simple. And I was good at set pieces and good at organising and passing and stuff like that. But I definitely felt that I sort of had missed the boat on that big move, which obviously I did. So I was out injured I was actually out injured for about 4 months with my spleen, and that while I was out, the lads went on a good cup run. And then we got drawn against Everton away in the FA Cup. And I'm like, I'm playing in that. I've got to play in that. So I sort of rushed to get back fit because, if I declared myself fit at Orient, I would then play. So I think I played, maybe I came on as sub or something, I can't quite remember, but I definitely played in the game before the Everton match. And then I declared myself fit. I was in the starting lineup, playing at Goodison in front of a full house. Paul Gascoigne's playing. It was, a great game. After 2 minutes, I am breathing out my backside thinking, what am I doing? I should not be on this football pitch. I was just so out of shape. I would just, it was awful. And it was that bad. And I had that much of a stinker where in the second half, and because I think it might have even been like maybe 2-2 at the time or 2-1 to them, but it was close. And I got the ball in their box. Because I used to, obviously as a fullback, I used to sort of like bomb forward quite a lot. I know the Dundee fans never probably saw that because I was too old to run when I came up to Scotland. But yeah, when I was younger and I could run, I was in the box and the ball came to me, and their right back, I think it was like Tony Hibbert maybe at the time, he came sliding in and I've touched the ball past him. And ordinarily I would leave a leg there, he would take me out, be a penalty. But I'm on penalties and I'm having a stinker. So I have hurdled him. I've jumped as high as I could to ride the tackle because I knew if I had taken the penalty, I would have definitely missed. So I purposely jumped over him to to not get a penalty. And then, about 5 minutes later, my number came up, number 3, come on, Matt, off you come. And then I then didn't play for Orient for another probably, maybe 6 to 8 weeks after that, because they said, look, you need to recover. But in that time, Barry comes to me and says, look, we want to sign you on a new deal because we know you're going to recover. We know you're going to be the same player you were. And then again, I go and sign a new contract with them. And then so the process goes on. And when you come back from the injury and prove to people that you're not, your spleen's fine now, obviously I haven't got a spleen, but, you've recovered from the actual surgery, you've got another two years on your contract. So you can't get out then. So, not that it was, obviously, I wasn't bothered. I loved my time at Orient. I was there for 9 years, and like you say, I played over 300 games, and we had some amazing times. But I would have liked the opportunity to move on a little bit younger than I did.
Yeah, and you did get a big move in the end. I mean, you ended up going to Nottingham Forest. I love Nottingham Forest just simply for the anthem Mulleth Kintyre, and I think just the atmosphere of the club is just amazing. What then eventually made you move, or what happened that ended up being your move to Nottingham Forest? How did that come about?
So it came about because in my final year at Orient, we were in League One, we got promoted at this stage, and I scored an 11-minute hat-trick in a game. So we were 3-0 down at home to Gillingham. There was 15 minutes to go, and I scored an 11-minute hat-trick and we drew 3-3. So there used to be a program on Sky, I don't know whether they still do it, but it used to be called like the Football League Review. I think it's like EFL Goals or whatever now. And they always used to have a guest in the studio to go through the sort of like the week's like action. And it was on like a Wednesday or Thursday night, and they were going through all the goals from the Tuesday night games. And that was obviously when I scored my hat-trick. And the guest in the studio was Colin Calderwood, the Nottingham Forest manager. And obviously when they did the League One roundup, I was the main topic of conversation. And in the studio, Colin said, "Oh, yeah, Matt's an amazing player. He's definitely the best left back in this division. You know, he should have left Orient years ago and played at a much higher level." So I'm like, interesting that the Forest manager thinks that way of me. So I, you know, an agent, you know, obviously got in touch. No, I didn't, you know, I knew nothing about it. But yeah, an agent just contacted them and just said, "Look, you know, did you mean what you sort of said on TV? Is this a deal that we could maybe make happen?" So Forest, yeah, made an offer for me in the January transfer window, which Barry turned down, because we were not at the bottom of the league, but we were we could have been sucked into the relegation battle. And then, yeah, Barry said no, because I think they offered 250 grand, maybe? No, that's not, no, they offered 100 grand, sorry. They offered 100 grand, but he wanted 250, because he said, if we get relegated, it's going to cost the club 250 grand. And he said, without you in the team, we'll probably get relegated. Because that year I scored 11 goals from left back, and most of the goals I scored were to win points. Like, you know, the hat trick, I managed to get a point, but there was like quite a few penalties that I took that won the game. And so, you know, I was obviously an integral part of the team. So Barry realised that if I left, it would have severely weakened the club, and then we probably would have gone down. So he said, if I'm going to let you go, I want 250. And I'm like, but I'm out of contract in summer. I've got like 6 months left on my deal. How can you ask for that much money for me? I'm like 30, I think I was like 31 at the time. And he was like, well, I don't care. He said, you know, you're going to get a new contract. He said, like, that's not an issue. He said, you're not getting released. He said, so you can have the contract. He said, you know, I'll give you 2, 3, 4 years, whatever you want. He said, it doesn't matter. So I think I even ended up signing a new deal, because obviously he turned it down. But what he did say at that time, he said, look, he said, if we stay up and Forest come back in for you in the summer, he said, I'll let you go for 100 grand. So I was like, okay, fine. So again, Forest knew that. So end of the season, they came in for me, offered 100 grand. Barry turned it down. Literally couldn't make it up. So I rang him, Barry, can I come and see you, please? Yeah, of course you can, Lockie. Come on. Yeah, I'll see you in the office. Like proper just wheeler dealer type. So I've gone in his office. He's, oh, Lockie, like, you know, we're going to play golf soon, because I used to play golf with him quite a bit. And I was like, yeah, maybe, but can I have a chat about, like, you know, that you've turning down that offer of 100 grand when you promised me 6 months ago that you would accept an offer of 100 grand? And somebody went, oh yeah, I did, didn't I? I went, oh, I forgot. He went, oh, sorry about that. So anyway, so then he goes and accepts it. Even then, he still can't accept 100 grand. He still had to get 125 out of them, because I spoke to the chief exec at Forest after I'd signed, and the Forest chief exec was in the car with his son when Barry rang him to discuss the fee and stuff. And before the chief exec answered it, he said to his son, he went, son, listen to this guy on the phone. He said, I am going to get my pants pulled down here. He said, this guy is going to run rings around me. And he said, we're going to pay more than we want to. And lo and behold, obviously Barry goes and gets more money for me. But it was one of those where I had a choice. You know, I could have stayed at Orient. I could have got my testimonial. I could have stayed there. And if I'd have stayed there then, I'd probably still be there now. I'd never left. I'd, you know, be the manager or director of football or owner or something I'd have been. But because I'd missed out on all those opportunities to play for a big club, it was just, I just couldn't turn it down. At the age of 31, that was my chance to go and play for a big club. So I took it. You know, financially, I'd have been better off staying at Orient with my testimonial and everything else. But for me, it wasn't about the money. It was about playing at a big club and actually rewarding myself for the years of hard work that I'd put in to actually get that play at that level. You know, go to Forest, and it was brilliant. I loved it. On my debut, I go and get injured. first game of the season. We're playing at home to Bournemouth. Chris Commons played me an absolute hospital pass. I go in for it, and I do my ankle, and then I'm probably out for about six to 7 weeks. Play a reserve game on my comeback from injury, getting fit, did it again, same injury. I was out for 4 months, and in that time, the lad that was playing left back, the lad that they signed me to replace, was just playing really well, and the team were winning, and because we were in League One at the time, we were top. It was us and Leeds at the top of the league, and I basically couldn't get back in the team. And I was 32 now, and I just thought, well, do I want to sit on the bench at this age? I still had another year left on my contract. We got promoted to the Championship, which was great. But again, even getting promoted with Forest, I only played 12 games that year, 11 league games and a cup game. So I didn't really feel part of it. When we were celebrating at the end of walking around the pitch, I'm like, well, I didn't really do anything to be part of this. And I suppose in my career, where I've always just been, either club captain or that regular player, and I'd play 40 games a year or whatever, to go then to a big part, because I was injured and stuff, it didn't really feel like I was part of those celebrations. And then that summer, Colchester came in for me, and I sort of thought, well, I can go back to Essex. Not that was an issue, really. I didn't really care about that, but I just thought, well, Colchester had just been relegated from the Championship. Forest had gone up. I'm thinking, well, I don't want to go and be a sub. I want to just go and play. I don't know how long I've got left in my career. I might only have another couple of years to play. So I ended up leaving Forest after a season and going to Colchester. And it was, that was one of the biggest regrets of my career. I had an awful time at Colchester. And I wish I'd have stayed at Forest.
Yeah, and why did it not work out at Colchester? Obviously, you had a couple of loan moves out as well. What happened there?
Yeah, well, exactly what we were saying before, off air. Managers and their opinions. So the manager that signed me got sacked after a couple of months. I was actually out injured when he left, and they brought in Paul Lambert. And while I was out injured, the first thing he did was he went and signed a player. He went and signed a left back. I'm like, hang on, you haven't even seen me play. What are you doing? But his assistant manager used to be the assistant manager at Leyton Orient when I was there, and he clearly didn't like me. So he advised him to go and get another left back. And the left back they signed was the complete opposite to me. He was, he just smashed it in the channel, big meathead, loved the tackle, couldn't really pass it, just had a long throw. So there was nothing I could do to compete with him. I couldn't play the way he did. Obviously, he couldn't play the way like I can. But the manager preferred him as his fullback, just like a proper old school meathead. Obviously, if he listens to this, he'll probably be really offended, but that's my opinion. He wasn't even fit to tie my laces, but the manager just preferred the way he played, which is fine. At the end of the day, it's all about opinions. So under Lambert, I think I played one game in a year that he was there. And then when he left, Adi Boothroyd came in. And again, he preferred the other fullback, because Adi Boothroyd's tactics were just to smash it long and run after it. And I didn't play that way. I was a footballer, as you guys saw. So I think I played twice for him, maybe, or the other way around. I played twice for Lambert and once for Boothroyd. But in my 2 years at Colchester, I played 7 games. So it was, an absolute nightmare. Hated it there. Absolutely hated it. And couldn't wait for my contract to run out.
Yeah, and you ended up at Dens. You must have been waiting for that big move to Dens Park. That's what you were waiting for.
Well, this is it. But it came too late. I wish I'd have done it when I was 24, not 34. But it was one of those where, because I didn't play at Colchester, I think most clubs in England would have looked at it and thought, well, if Matt's 34, he is way too good not to play for Colchester. Why is he not playing for Colchester? Why has he gone out on loan to Barnet and Dagenham in League Two? And I honestly think that they just thought that I wasn't the player that I used to be. But it wasn't anything to do with that. It was just because these two managers just didn't fancy me. So I didn't really have that many options when I sort of left Colchester. You know, I was 34, you know, nearly 35, and it was Craig Easton actually that sort of instigated the move. Obviously, Craig Easton being a Dundee United player, you probably think, oh, but he was the captain at Southend United at the time. I lived in Southend still. I just went in and trained at Southend to get fit. And also I was sort of thinking, well, if I go in and get fit, they're going to see how good I am. Then they might even offer me a contract. But because they had dropped down the levels at that time, they didn't have the funds to have two first team left backs, and they'd already got a first team left back in. So there wasn't really a position for me. But anyway, so I was training with them every day, getting fit. And Easty just said to me one day, he said, look, he said, would you fancy going up to Scotland? And I was like, don't see why not. What do you think? And he said, look, he goes, I know Billy Dodd's up at Dundee. He said, I know they're looking for a left back. He said, do you want me to put a word in? I was like, 100%. So he rang Dodsey that day. Dodsey was like, yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, we need a left back. Is he good enough? And Easty was like, yeah, definitely. So yeah, made the call. I think I then travelled up that week. I can't quite remember when I arrived, what day it was, but I remember I played as a trialist, I think, my first game. And after the game, Dodgy and Chiz were like, yeah, we want to sign you. So yeah, gave me a year's contract.
Do you remember, did you ever hear about your predecessor before you came in as trialist? We had a trialist just before you came in. Did you ever hear about him?
I did. Didn't he get sent off or something?
Yeah, so the first game he played for Dundee, he had an absolute blinder, but he ended up getting sent off, I think. And then we ended up playing Stenhousemuir in the Cup the next game, and he had an absolute shocker. And we got beat 4-1 by Stenhousemuir, who were League One, League Two at the time. It was a disaster of a result. And he, so after that second game, we got rid of him. And then we obviously must have brought you in after it, sorry.
It's crazy, isn't it? Because like I say, if that second game he'd done okay, they'd have probably signed him, and then we wouldn't be sitting here now, would we? But yeah, I think sometimes things happen for a reason, don't they? And yeah, one lad's poor performance opened a door for me to come in, and like I say, you know, again, as soon as I came up here, it felt like home, and everyone was so friendly and welcoming, and it felt like it was the right move and the right fit at the time. So yeah, so played that first game, obviously. Yeah, did all right, and they saw what they wanted to see, and then yeah, signed a year's contract.
I was trying to remember the name of the guy. It was like Sansara or something like that. I remember it was his name. And that's it. Yeah. So yeah. So not long after you obviously joined the club, club went into a bit of turmoil. It's never a dull moment in your career, Matt, to be honest with you. So obviously you've seen guys lose jobs, you've seen backroom staff lose jobs, and you got the position of player assistant manager alongside Rab Douglas. Was coaching ever on your radar at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I've done all my coaching badges. You know, I would have started my badges in my mid to early 20s, I would have thought. As I said, I mean, I did my B license with Ian Holloway, and then I did my A license when I was at Colchester. You know, and that was a 2-week residential course with the likes of Gianfranco Zola and Dennis Wise and Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank. So that was an experience in itself, doing your coaching badge with guys like that. So yeah, so it was always on my radar, and I think it's just one of those where every player sort of thinks, well, when I get old, I'm just going to go and coach, because you don't know anything else. You leave school at 16. And you play football every day of your life. So it's not as though you've got many qualifications to fall back on. So it was in the back of my mind to do that. Whether I went into it or not, I suppose it was just about luck and being in the right place at the right time. And I don't know whether you can class being at Dundee at the right place at the right time when the club are going into administration, could potentially go out of business, everyone's losing their jobs. But it was interesting, actually, because when that happened, I was sort of fairly blasé about it from a player's perspective, because I was saying to the boys, well, it doesn't really affect us, does it? Because we're preferred creditors. We can't lose our jobs. And they were like, I'm not sure that's right. And I was like, well, it definitely is, because I was always the PFA rep at every club I played for in England. So I was a PFA rep at Orient, at Forest, at Colchester. So I'd been a PFA rep for probably 10, 12 years, something like that. And so I sort of knew the rules, and I used to go to all the AGMs at the PFA, and I was quite involved in that. So in England, if a club goes into administration, and I don't know if it's still the same now, I presume it is, but the players are preferred creditors, so they cannot lose their job. Everyone in the backroom team, all the the chefs and the secretaries and everything, they can all get sacked, but players cannot. So I'm saying to the boys, no, we're fine. Like, we can't get sacked. And they were like, I think we can. And I'm like, I'm not sure. So anyway, I'm on the phone to PFA Scotland, and they were like, no, everyone's fair game up here. No one's safe. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So when it happened, it was horrible. Watching, the day absolutely, when the curtain came down, and you're seeing like your teammates, and bear in mind, I'd only been there 6 weeks, so I didn't really know the guys that well, but you're seeing these guys like in tears, that they're losing their livelihood, they're losing the ability to put food on the table for their family. It was heartbreaking. It really was heartbreaking. And you could see how much it meant to them, but also how much it meant to everyone else at the club. Even guys behind the scenes, like the secretary at the time, Laura, and everyone who's working in the offices, because it is a small club. Everyone knows everyone, and everyone's got that personal relationship. And the tears and emotion on that day when it actually happened was awful to see. I suppose you're looking at it from a sort of a personal point of view. I'm like, well, it's actually worked out okay for me. I've kept my job. I've now been promoted to assistant manager. It sort of couldn't have worked any better, really. But yeah, from the other lads, it was horrific. But I think going through that as a club and as a squad, it really brought us together, and it really, I mean, I've actually got a. Well, let me just 2 seconds. I'll show you what I've got up on the wall.
Can't wait for this.
Yeah, I don't know whether this makes me sad.
Oh wow!
But the Deefiant calendar. So that just sits up on the wall in the kitchen here. But I mean, it's a 2021 calendar. But it's that season. Honestly, you could do a Netflix documentary about it. I mean, it's a shame that you didn't have the cameras behind the scenes like you do now with all the Wrexham stuff and everything, because that was incredible. And no club, I don't think, will go through anything like that again. I mean, I've never heard of it happen before, and I've never heard of it happen since. But the fact that we got left with 11 players, and 11 good players as well. Barry getting promoted from youth team boss to first team boss, it was just like all hands on deck. This is happening. We've only got one option, and it is to fight for our lives. And I think that's what we did. And it was interesting because you had 11 players. You sort of knew the team every week. You knew you were playing. You knew the tactics because it was the same as the week before. So there wasn't really anything that Barry needed to do, or I needed to do, or Rab needed to do. It was a case of, well, lads, we've just been taking 25 points of us. It's like, eat, sleep, play a game, repeat sort of thing. It was just keep doing what you're doing. And that's all we could do. And I think that division that year wasn't great standard wise. So it allowed us, with the players that we had, and the fact that, I mean, even Gary Harkins was even running around that season as a midfielder. He broke into a sweat. That shows how much people were trying. Well, Gary's a lazy git. That's what I'm trying to say. He's one of the most talented players I've ever played with. But boy, if he had, effort in his game, he could have played like at the top level. So even that season, Jeevesy was running around. That shows how much it meant to people. But again, obviously I'm messing around. But Jeevesy was a great player. You got we had Lee Griffiths up front. You got Craig Forsyth in front of me, and obviously I was the reason he was doing so well, because I was just telling him what to do and bossing him around and passing amazing through balls for him to go and score loads of goals. And I got him the move to down south to Watford, and then so that's all down to me, clearly. But we had such a good team. And we all had something to fight for. And then how the drama unfolded and the sort of like the romantic side of it, where guys would come out of retirement and play, and fans would come and play as trialists. It had everything. It was incredible. But I remember, I always say that the most or the best teams I've played for, like as in not like Nottingham Forest or QPR or whatever, but the best, like most successful teams on the pitch that I played for was the ones that had the best team spirit. And we had a couple of seasons at Orient when the team spirit was incredible. And we've still got a WhatsApp group chat now, which we all still, 20 years down the line, we all still sort of chat on there fairly regularly. But that year at Dundee, the team spirit was incredible. Like I remember, I think Rab's mum passed away that year, and we ended up that Christmas, we came into Edinburgh actually, and we went to the karaoke on George Street, and Rab got up and sang a song, and he said, "Oh, this is for my mum." And the 11 players and Barry, we were in floods of tears, all cuddling each other in a group, and it was so emotional. But it was sort of it felt like it was a sort of release from everything we'd been through, and obviously what Rab had been through with his mum, but we were there for him, sort of thing. It was, and I've never really experienced anything like that before, to be that close with all the boys. And it was one of those where even if the games that we maybe weren't playing well in, and someone would make a mistake, where at other clubs you'd be like, oh, you'd abuse someone. But you wouldn't even do that. You would be like, well, he's made a mistake. I'm going to run that extra yard to get him out of the hole and go and make that tackle, or block that shot, or do whatever it was that you needed to do. And that is why we went on the run we did, because we had that special bond. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether we would have had that if we hadn't gone into administration. I don't think we would, because to go through everything we did, like we did. And then also it brought the fans together as well. It just brought the whole club together. And I mean, I got invited back to the Player of the Year dinner at the is it the Invercars Hotel that they do that, whoever it is. And the reception I got when I got introduced to the room was incredible. And I'm like, bearing in mind I'm English as well, so that's like a negative, isn't it? Like, oh, I don't like the English. But you know what I mean? But it's one of those where the fans appreciated us. And I suppose at the time, you don't realise that you're having that much of an effect on these people's lives. But you're saving the club that they love, that they've supported since a kid, and they will support till the day they die. And to be a part of that was special. And really, I'm so pleased and proud that I was in that, at the club at that time. And I was delighted to put, I suppose, help some little way towards saving the club. But it was an incredible sort of I suppose what's the word I'm looking for, baptism of fire, I think, wasn't it, coming up to Scotland?
Yeah. It's never a dull moment at Dens, but I mean, those 11 players in that team, I'm not exaggerating when I say that they will be remembered, yourself included, up there with the team that won the league in 1962. I think, or 1960, 1962, whenever it was. I think that team will always be remembered. And I mean, I was 14 at the time. And I think I look back on it.
No one likes to show off.
No, but I
look at me. I'm so young.
No, I'm feeling my age now. But I look back on that era, and I feel like I didn't appreciate it enough at the time because I was so young, and I wish it had happened later on watching football because I was so young at the time. But look back on that season, that was amazing what that team did. But honestly, hands down, as you said, Netflix documentary. If they had the technology back then, it would have been definitely something that they would have done for sure.
But no, like you say, I mean, just the whole the whole season, just of all those like just crazy things, like with Robbo coming and playing for us as a fan, Neil McCann coming out of retirement and playing and scoring the winner against Wraith. It just had everything. Like literally, it had everything. The only thing it didn't have, which it maybe should have done, was Barry should have got his boots on and come and played. If that had happened, then that would have literally just been the icing on the cake, wouldn't it? But it's just, especially to go on such a long unbeaten run, and then even when we lost to Wraith, the game we lost, we probably only had like 5 or 6 first team players playing. We had all the kids playing. I remember we had, I think in the youth team at the time, we had 2 right backs, and one of the right backs was playing left wing in front of me. And you're like, how are we ever going to beat Wraith at this? And then the goal they ended up scoring to beat us was like a Tony Yeboah volley off the crossbar, hitting the floor and going in and beating Rab from like 30 yards. And you're like, that's what it took to beat us, because it didn't really matter what players played. We all had that fight and that hunger and that desire to, I suppose, to not allow the league to win and to relegate us, or the FA or the SFA to relegate us. They just gave us that bit between the teeth, that every time we stepped on that pitch, we had a reason to go and win. So Barry's team talks, he didn't really need to say anything. Because it was done. All he needed to do was just put the league table up there, or SFA Dundee 25 points. That's all he needed to do every game, because it was just so repetitive. The games were coming so quickly, one after the other. We would play, we would train, like do a 5-a-side or whatever, because we didn't have enough players to do anything else, and then just go and play the next game. And it was just, it sort of felt like the momentum. We were just a juggernaut, just trundling along, just getting results after result after result. And it was enjoyable. I must admit, it was a really good, fun experience. Obviously, once all the horrible stuff had sort of gone.
And you talked about the Neil McCann goal there. Who assisted that goal? I can't remember. Who was it?
I can't remember.
It was you.
Was it me? Was it?
It was you.
I have literally no idea. I know I didn't go and celebrate with him because I was. What? So did I cross it from the left, or was it a corner or free kick or something?
So I think it was.
I'd have to get that one back and have a look.
Somebody passed it to you, and you sort of backed on yourself and sort of hoofed it in the box, and then Neil McCann, the most unorthodox finish I've ever seen in my life. It was brilliant. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was a shanked finish, wasn't it? He definitely didn't catch it properly. But because I remember the first goal, it was Gary Harkin's free kick, wasn't it? And
that was a corker as well. People forget about that goal.
Yeah, no, of course. But I think he said somewhere before that he had a free kick in the same sort of position about 10 minutes before, and he took it and he missed. And then I think when he got that free kick, he said that I said to him, just do exactly the same again. You're definitely going to score this. You've got your range now. The first one was a practice. You'll get this one in. I can't remember saying that. I can't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning, let alone what I said to him, 12 years ago or however long ago it was. But apparently that's what I said. So then that sort of not inspired him to go and stick it in the top corner. But I suppose he probably thought, okay. And then, he whipped it in. And like you say, it was an amazing goal. But everyone only remembers Neil's winner when then he goes and runs and chucks himself in the dairy.
Yeah, scenes in that game. I tell you, that was amazing. That was, just so much amazing memories of that season. I'll never forget it as long as I live. So we obviously went into the next season, finished second in the league, and then at the end of the season we ended up going up by default because Rangers went bust.
So when we got that promotion, I was still there, and then when we went up into the SPL, then Barry started bringing in a few players to sort of try and compete at that level. But it was just one of those where, because I suppose it only officially got announced a week before the season started, it didn't give us much time to sort of recruit the right players needed. I sort of knew beforehand, quite a long time beforehand, that we were going to go up, because again, I was on the management committee of the PFA, so they were quite heavily involved in speaking to the SFA, so they knew, and I was told that we were going to go up and Rangers were going to get relegated. and not so much Rangers relegated. We all knew that, but it wasn't. They weren't sure if St Mirren, I think it was at the time, were going to stay up or go down, and we would replace Rangers. But yeah, so I knew quite a long time before it officially got announced. But again, Barry didn't really want to go and sign players because it hadn't officially been announced. So I suppose they could have changed their minds. I mean, I had been told under no uncertain terms that it was definite. It had been decided. We were 100% going up. So potentially we could have probably bought players in a little bit sooner than we did. But, I suppose, again, didn't want to make any mistakes in case. And that year, I think Barry, not at the start of the season, but maybe halfway through, he brought in Brian Easton. And again, it's one of those where, from my perspective, I appreciate I was getting old, and I don't think I was doing anything where I should have been replaced. I don't think I should have got dropped, but I'm 37, 38, whatever I was at the time, and I'm no spring chicken. I know I'm well past my sell by date. I'm not actually sort of quite gutted that the Dundee fans didn't actually see me in my prime and see how good I actually was, because I was like quite a good player, to be fair. But you guys only got me when I was old and didn't run around much. But so I know how football works. He brings Eastie in, who's probably 12, 13 years younger than me, and he played. So I didn't play every game that season. I can't even remember how many games I played in the SPL, but I played more than enough. I remember playing at Parkhead for a little bit before I got sent off after coming on as sub at half time and getting sent off 3 minutes later. That was a great highlight for me. But it was a really good experience to play in the SPL, even though we were the whipping boys and we were bottom of the league. And obviously, Barry brought in loads of players, and what I was saying about the team spirit we had in the Deefiant year, where we were so close, and that team spirit won us games. The team spirit was the complete opposite that year in the SPL, and that's why we lost games. There was like little fractions in the dressing room. It wasn't. The team spirit wasn't there. There's boys in that dressing room that I've never spoken to since, and I would never speak to again if I don't bump into them. You know what I mean? There wasn't it, and I suppose it comes off the back of losing every week and being at the bottom of the league. It's not a great environment. Then obviously halfway through the league, Barry loses his job, and again you sort of think, well, it's a bit harsh, isn't it? Because it was sort of put on us and we didn't have the players to cope. So then why is then Barry the one losing his job off the back of it? It's unfair, but again, football's a results business, and the club thinking, well, if we change the manager, we might stay up, and obviously if we stay up, there's more money for us, and that's just how the world works, isn't it? And I'm sure, however gutted and disappointed Barry was at the time, he'd probably, obviously I heard his interview with you, and he said, look, I appreciate it is a results business, and even though he felt he didn't deserve it, he looks back now and thinks, well, I can understand why they did it. It didn't work anyway. Bomber came in and, he sort of ruled by an iron fist, and he was very strict, and he, we knew he was the boss, but we just didn't have the players good enough to stay up. That was basically the sort of like where you went wrong. Unfortunately we went down that season, but again, it was a great experience to play in the SPL, all the big clubs, and see that the difference between the Championship and the SPL actually isn't that big. And we could go and compete. It was just that little bit of quality we were lacking.
Mm-hmm. And you still had one position change left, didn't you, as well? Under Bomber, you ended up becoming a sweeper, didn't you?
I did. I've never played there before, so he must have dreamt up that idea. But again, I get why he did it, because ultimately, because of my age and my experience and my personality, I was very vocal on the pitch. I used to tell people what to do and where to go and organise people. I can't play football being quiet, even now. So I'm 47. I played dad's football on a Thursday night with the dads at school. They're all sort of like ex-rugby players, and it's 6-a-side indoors on a Thursday. And if you come to watch, all you would do is hear me barking orders at people: stay with your man, track him, like right backs on, left backs on, play forward, like drop in, man each. Like I'm literally, I cannot play football being quiet. So where we had quite a young defence with John. Like we had, Carl Benedictus, who was at the start of his career. We had, Declan Gallagher. John said, right, if you sit in the middle of those two, organise them, just sort of like, everything's in front of you. And I was like, yeah, absolutely fine. I can do that. I really enjoyed it, actually. I really enjoyed it. And, we had a bit of success off the back of it. I'm one of those people. If the manager says, right, go and play right wing, I'll go and play right wing. I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to disagree. I'll do what I'm told, because I've got respect, and that's how I was brought up. The manager's the manager, and his decision's final, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I've seen that. Obviously, it's difficult to see what happens behind the scenes, but I could have seen that when you were on the pitch at Dens. You were a proper professional footballer, and I think that came across quite well on the pitch too.
Yeah, I think you don't play for as long as I did if you didn't have the right attitude, because you would get found out, and managers would be like, no, I don't fancy him. I see players now, and they're good players, but they struggle to get a club because they're idiots off the pitch, and like they're not team players, and they're not in the dressing room they would be the one causing issues, where I wasn't like that. I was a model professional. I'd always be early. I would always be in the gym and doing extra and like organising things and helping things. And I mean, at Dundee, bloody hell, I was the bus driver. I used to drive the minibus to train every day, so they couldn't get rid of me anyway. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to get the training. But I've always been like that. I've always sort of been, I suppose, older than my years and boring and just being the model pro. And again, you don't play up until you're sort of 38, 39 if you're not like that. I mean, you look at guys now like sort of James Milner and these sort of players. And I know, boring James Milner, but that's what you need to have a long career. And I think some of the managers that sort of managed me when I was older didn't have that attitude and didn't have that commitment that I did and that professionalism. And they let themselves go or drank too much, and then they were out of shape, so they had to retire early. Probably looked at me and thought, well, Matt's going to be 38. I retired by the time I was 32, 33, 34. How's he still playing? Right, I'll just get someone younger in. They probably didn't appreciate that I was, still able to keep up with the youngsters and do a job. But for me, even the next year when we went up, I felt it was harsh when I didn't play, because what I brought to the club, brought to the side, was more than just running up and down and loads of effort. It was way more than that. But again, it's all about opinions, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And then obviously, sitting top of the league, John Brown departed the club. There was a story that broke in the paper that you'd actually applied for the manager's job at that time. Firstly, is that true? And was this again something that was on your radar at the time, that you were going to become a manager?
It's true. I mean, I spoke to Bill Colvin, and I just said, look, let me take over. I'll get us promoted. I know exactly what we need to do, and I guarantee us will go up. At the end of the day, we were top of the league anyway. It was a pretty much foregone conclusion if you just did things right. So I can't remember when he left how far above, like, how far ahead we were. So we were sort of getting caught. We were sort of going backwards a little bit. But I knew what we needed to do. It was so simple. Football's such an easy game. It's complicated by people that are trying to make it like difficult, but I knew exactly what we needed to do. So I spoke to Bill and I just said, look, give me the job. But I sort of knew they'd already tapped up Paul Hartley, and I knew he was probably going to take over anyway. But I just thought I'd offer my services on the hope that they would give it to me. But again, a club that are going for promotion, that desperately needed to get in the SPL for financial reasons, are they going to give it to someone that's never managed before, or are they going to go to someone that has a bit of a track record, that has done well at a small club before? And they bought Paul in, which sort of ended my career really at Dundee.
Yeah, it's a way to say your departure at Dens was like, what was your memories of that? Because obviously it was a bit of doing a bit of research. It was kind of a sour ending for you at Dens, wasn't it?
Yeah, I was fuming, to be fair, because I'd been there 4 years, and everything I'd done for the club, and don't get me wrong. So basically, what had happened is the second to last game that Bomber was in charge before he got sacked, we played Falkirk away, and he changed the system again and put me at sweeper. And I think Kyle got sent off in the first half, and we got spanked. I think we lost 3-0, but it could have been 7 or 8. And then the next game, which was John Brown's last game in charge, he dropped me and put Willie Dyer in at left back. So he went back to a back 4, and I was the one that got left out. I'm like, well, hang on. I've been playing well at left back for the last 20 games. You changed the system, which you shouldn't have done. You should have left it as a back 4. You've put me in a sweeper. We've had a man sent off. It was a shambles anyway. And now I'm the one being punished. I'm like, well, how does that work? So I can't remember who the game was against. It might have been like Ayr at home or someone. It wasn't anyone any good. And I think we might have drawn or something. And then John got sacked after that game. I then obviously applied, whatever, didn't get it. Paul's come in and said, right, I'm just going to keep the same starting 11. And I'm like, well, that's not really the same starting 11. I've played the last 25 games. Willie's played 1. Surely I should go back in. But, again, he's the manager. And that was it. I've never played again. So my last game for Dundee was Falkirk away in an absolute shambles of a game. I was then on the bench for a few games, and Paul brought in like this little fitness guy, geezer, I can't remember his name, and he used to run us after the games. I hate running after games as a sub. Last thing you want to do. And we were doing these stupid runs, and I ended up pulling my calf, and I was out for probably a month, and then never got back in. So comes the end of the season. And, I'd never really had a relationship with the manager. I think maybe he might have known that I'd applied for the job, and he maybe thought I was a threat, bearing in mind him and I are like pretty much exactly the same age. I think our birthdays are like a day apart. He obviously didn't like me, didn't rate me as a person or a player or a coach or anything, whatever. It got to the end of the season, and then I got a text message from Harry McLean, and he was like, "Oh, Matt, I've just seen you've been released. Thank you so much for all your time at the club. It's been amazing." I'm like, what? I went back and went, I haven't been released. What are you talking about? I said, I haven't heard anything from the club. And he said it was on the club website. So I've logged onto the club website and I said, oh, yeah, Matt Lockwood's been released. And I'm like, hang on. I've been here 4 years. I've saved the club from extinction. I've done pretty well, I think, for the club. Surely the manager should have called me in and said, look, Matt, you're not part of my plans next year. I'm going to release you. Didn't hear anything from him. Didn't hear anything from John Nelms. Not a single person from that football club rang me to let me know that I was being released. And I'm like, that is just disgusting. I was so angry and so disappointed and felt let down. Hartley's irrelevant. He hadn't been at the club. He didn't know what we'd done. Obviously, it's shocking as a manager not to call a player in, especially someone as experienced as me. To actually do it face to face, just to be a bit of a shithouse, to be fair, and just literally blank me and do it like that. Yeah, I wasn't happy at all. I actually tried to go to the press, but they none of them wanted to do it because they would have got banned from going into the club. So they all politely declined my offer of doing an exclusive of being shafted as I left. And yeah, it sort of left a bitter taste in my mouth, to be fair. And I didn't go back to Dens for ages after that. So I didn't really want to bump into people. I didn't want to say anything to them because I'm like, well, if I see them, I'm definitely going to say something. And I didn't think it was appropriate. But yeah, that I know football's a ruthless business, but there's ways of doing things. And just be honest with people. At the end of the day, I was 38. I was nearly 39. I was probably going to leave anyway because I'd been offered a deal down in London for a non-league team who were offering me more money than I was on at Dundee anyway. So I was probably going to go regardless, but do things the right way. So that really hurt, to be fair. Really sort of didn't ruin my time there. Obviously, I had a great time, but it definitely, I think a lot less of the people that were involved at that time than I did originally.
That's a real shame, actually. I wasn't sure whether to ask that in this podcast because I didn't know how that all went down, and you don't know what's been twisted by the press and all that kind of stuff. But it's a real shame because it doesn't matter if you're a Defiant legend or whether you're a youth player that's getting released. It's common decency to just let you know where you stand instead of finding out through a club website that you've been released.
But the best thing about all of that, right? Can you remember there was a lad called, I think it was Sean Bonnet Johnson.
Oh no, he didn't even play.
Remember him? Didn't even play. He came up from London. He was useless. Wasn't good enough to play for Dundee at all. Never played. He got called in by the manager to get released. So I'm like, so I'm 38. I've played 600 games. I've played 100 games for Dundee. The fans quite like me. Yet you call a young lad in who's never played a game of football in his life, and you've released him, but you don't do it to me. Like, yeah, not for me at all. Yeah, I wasn't overly impressed with that. But again, that's football. And I suppose nothing surprises me in football. I've seen it all. I've probably experienced it all. And it's just that I suppose it's just another chapter in the book when I end up writing one. Or it's an interesting conversation to have on podcasts like this, isn't
it? So you went down south, brief spell at Sutton United, and then obviously hung up your boots. Why was the decision made at that point to hang up your boots? Was it just age, legs going?
No, not at all. And to be fair, I've never officially retired. So I haven't actually retired. So if anyone's out there that needs an old left back that can't run, give us a call. I'm available. But no, so I went down to Sutton, and that was awful. Didn't enjoy that at all. So that didn't last very long. And then when I came back, I got offered a contract at a couple of clubs, but I just didn't really fancy it. I went and trained with Berwick Rangers, and it was one of those where I was, like I said, I was turning 39. I was getting offered more and more games to commentate on the BBC, and I couldn't do both. And I thought to myself, well, if I carry on playing, am I going to miss the opportunities to go into the sort of like the media side of things? And basically just the offers I got didn't really interest me, if I'm honest. I didn't really want to drop down the levels because I knew I wouldn't enjoy it playing with players that weren't very good. And again, this probably sounds big time, but it's bad enough playing with players like Gary Harkins, let alone playing with players that can't control the football. But if I'd have got offered a contract at a club that I'd have fancied, I would have carried on playing. And I think I could have easily played into my 40s because I was fit, and I the way I played was fairly simple. As long as I suppose the way I look at it is, as long as I wasn't getting roasted by my winger all the time, every time we got the ball, if he was knocking it past me and running and getting crosses in more than normal, because obviously, let's be honest, right wingers used to knock it past me and run and get crosses in. But if I felt like my legs had gone and I couldn't do a job, then I would have obviously walked away. But I didn't feel that way. I still feel that Dundee should have kept me on. And I know Willie Dyer, he was a great lad and and a decent player for Dundee. But I still feel that I could have done a job, and I should have been kept on there. And I think I could have played for another 2 or 3 years. I really do, because for me, age affects people differently. I've never drunk alcohol in my life. I don't drink. So, I think people that do drink, that takes years off you. I did keep myself fit, and 100% I could have carried on playing. But like I say, age does affect people's decision, and so I think football sort of retired me in a way, but then I went off to do my media stuff. So instead of running around and trying to do it, I now talk about it.
Yeah, good segue there. So you're obviously working for BBC London now, and you're also involved with the Montserrat national team as the technical director. Are you gonna let us know a little bit about that and how that came about?
Yep. So the BBC stuff, I've been doing that. Well, I was doing that while I was still playing at Dundee. So I've been doing that for about maybe 12 years. So we cover Premier League games. I mean, I've done Champions League. Actually, I did Barcelona versus Tottenham at the Nou Camp, which was quite cool. But yeah, we do sort of Premier League, FA Cup, Championship, League One, League Two, but it's predominantly the Premier League. So, you know, I'm here, there, and everywhere down south, going to, you know, Old Trafford, the Etihad, Anfield, Goodison, you know, St James's Park. So I get to go and visit all these lovely stadiums and watch some decent football. So yeah, so that's good. But yeah, but the Montserrat gig's a really interesting one. So that came about a couple of years ago. Had a phone call from a friend of mine, obviously Brent Sancho, as I said, ex-Dundee player. He lives out in Trinidad now. And he just said, look, you know, Montserrat are looking for a head coach and a technical director. The role was going to be a dual role, do both. So he said, look, do you fancy it? And I was like, 100%. So got the job. You know, so originally I was doing both. So I, you know, started off, obviously trying to recruit the best players that we possibly could, because Montserrat's an interesting place. So it's a small island. For those of you that are busy Googling where is Montserrat now, it's a small island in the Caribbean next to Antigua. So the way you get there is you fly to Antigua, and then you get like a little 8-seater plane. It takes 20 minutes to get to Montserrat. It's got a tiny little runway, but Montserrat is famous for having an active volcano on the island, which erupted sort of 30 years ago, and it destroyed half the island. But because Montserrat is a British colony, everyone on the island has got a British passport. So the guys whose houses were destroyed and that they could never go back into, because what they've done is they've closed half the island off, and it's called the exclusion zone. So that the volcano is being monitored every day, so they know if it's going to erupt, and it hasn't erupted since, but it could. So they've just said, look, if this erupts again, we know where the sort of like the danger zone is. No one can ever live here anymore. So everyone whose house was destroyed and was in an area where they couldn't go back, they had to leave because there was nowhere for them to live. So they all moved to the UK. So every player that we've got in the national team, the men's national team, they're all from England. Even there's two lads that live abroad, but they, one moved to Cyprus to open up a bar and a restaurant. Another lad is playing out in Dubai. But the 99% of the boys are living down south. So it's a really unique sort of project. When I go to all FIFA meetings, which I have to as part of my role as technical director, you go away and you're with other technical directors from all the other nations. So you might be with the guys from Australia or New Zealand or Ghana or everywhere, all over the world. We meet in different areas, so people then don't have to travel as far. And it's really interesting to see, a guy like the guy from Singapore, what he has to cope with compared to the guy from Morocco or the guy from the United States, because obviously the vast size of the countries. Where, with me, in Montserrat, the population is under 5,000 people. So it's tiny, but they've probably got more Montserratians in the UK than they have in Montserrat, which is bizarre. But it's trying to find players with Montserrat heritage and where they're based and where their families sort of like emigrated to. So we've got a lot of players that do qualify for Montserrat that don't come and play for it yet because they maybe don't want to drop, or they feel that it's dropping down a level from where they're playing, or they're young and they want to try and play for England or Jamaica, or there was one lad that I think qualified for Nigeria as well, and he fancied that. So there's loads of different, I suppose, reasons why they don't come and play for Montserrat. So I suppose it's part of my job to try and convince them and sell them the dream, and look, we could maybe qualify for a World Cup or the Gold Cup and stuff. But it's a very random one. It came about, obviously, like I said, through Brent, but it's great. It's really good. The players are real good bunch of players. None of them have played at the top level, but it's a little bit like the Deefiant year, where off the back of a disaster, they've put a team together, and they're doing it for their families that houses were destroyed or their grandparents were born there, and they've got a reason to go and play, and they make a huge effort to go and play because they all live in the UK. They have to trek all the way over to the Caribbean for games. It's a long way, and it's tiring to go and travel that far. And then when you get there, you might not be staying in the most luxurious of places, or the pitches might not be the best, or the coach might not come and pick you up from the airport and you're standing there in 30 degrees heat for an hour waiting. So it's not always the most glamorous, but they go every single trip and they wouldn't miss it. And it's just trying to get some other players to come on board that can improve the squad, because if they did, they could actually be one of the better teams over in the Caribbean.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, again, we spoke about this off camera. We're speaking for about half an hour before the podcast even started off camera, and it's really interesting what you're doing, and it's really different to what I expected. What you would be doing right now after being at Dens for 4 years. It's really different, but it's good. It's good to hear that you're doing something you're selling a dream to people, and you're helping a small country to get on the map, I guess.
Yeah, no, of course, and don't get me wrong. I've done other bits and pieces. I've had other day jobs in my time, but that's what I'm doing now. And as I said, I was the head coach and technical director at the start. So my international managerial career lasted for 2 games, and I don't think I was sacked, but Lee Bowyer became available. And our president was like, well, look, Lee Bowyer is an ex-Premier League footballer, Championship manager, Charlton and Birmingham. If he wants to come and manage, let's get him in. So he came in, and it actually gave the lads a bit of a lift. Well, massive lift, to be fair, because going from having a donut like me in charge to then having Lee Bowyer, that they were like, wow, Lee Bowyer, he's played for Newcastle and Leeds, and he's a real deal. The respect that he gets just walking in the room is immense. Obviously, he has to then earn that respect by being a good coach and being a good manager and everything else. Because ultimately, it doesn't matter how you look at guys like Frank Lampard, Steven Gerrard, and all these big name players that try and become managers. Look at Wayne Rooney; he's a disaster at Birmingham. It doesn't just because you're a good player doesn't mean you're going to be a good manager. Managers that I've played under, they haven't got any man management skills, and people like players hate them. And they don't want to play for them. And when they get sacked, they're going to get sacked, because the players are like, I don't care that you're losing your job, because you're not nice. You're not a good coach. You're not a good person. So Lee has come in, and the boys are buzzing off it. But what he's also done is he's managed to attract a couple of the players that were on the fence, that have sort of said, okay, well, if Lee Bowyer's come in, what's going on there? And it's a little bit of FOMO, fear, they don't want to miss out on something. But if we could attract all the players that qualified to play for Montserrat, if they all came, I think we could, with a lot of hard work and a little bit of luck, we could actually qualify for the World Cup. And can you imagine that? It's like, Jamaica qualifying for the bobsleigh team, with Cool Runnings. It would be that sort of, a country with less than 5,000 people living on the island, and they could potentially qualify for the World Cup. I mean, the draw has been made, and I can't remember who's in our group off the top of my head. But, the team spirit we've got, we could definitely do some damage. Whether we're good enough to qualify, probably not, maybe. But as I said, with some of the players that do qualify, even if a couple of them came, we would be really close. I really do think. So it's an interesting project. Like I say, I get to travel around the Caribbean, to the hatred I get at home when I go off on these trips. My wife and daughters are like, "You're going to go to the Caribbean? We're stuck in Scotland. It's raining. It's cold." And I'm like, near a beach, not that I go to any beaches because I'm working when I go there, but it probably sounds more glamorous than it is. But yeah, I've been to some very interesting places over the last sort of 18 months or so.
That's it. And you've got a new fan as well. I'm definitely going to keep an eye out now and see what the Montserrat results are. So no, Matt Lockwood, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. The amount of time you've taken tonight to speak to me it's been very much appreciated, and I wish you all the best for the future as well. Thank you very much for coming on, mate.
No, but thanks for inviting me. It's been a pleasure reminiscing. It's brought back some great memories.
Yeah, no, great. No, thank you very much for coming on. Thanks to you all for watching, and we'll catch you for the next one. Cheers.